Hey guys, welcome back to Inside Marketing. I'm super excited today. I'm joined by Hannah, who's the marketing director at PRF Composite Materials, and she's been really kind enough to give up some of her time to walk us through her marketing journey. Maybe walk us through the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I suppose just really understand from her perspective, what are maybe some of the things that senior marketing professionals need to be looking at these days when kind of operating a marketing function. So, Hannah, lovely to see you. Great to have you on here.
Very nice to be here. Thank you, Josh.
It's an absolute pleasure. So let's dive straight in then. So one place I always really like to start, if you don't mind, Hannah, is I suppose, do you mind kind of giving the audience a bit of an overview in terms of, your marketing journey, I suppose, kind of from where you started, almost like navigating through to kind of where you are now?
Sure. I started as a marketing assistant in an academic publishing house.
Ah,
So,
interesting.
yeah, and up until that point, marketing wasn't really something that I'd considered because I went through university very, very focused on being a historian, an academic
Really?
historian. Yes,
Wow.
yes. So, but I got to postgraduate studies, and I had a very, very good tutor, my personal tutor, and she was like, "I think you've gone as far as what is suited to you, and I don't think academia is the place where you're going to be able to unleash your interest in all of these different
Yeah.
things and the creativity that takes." So that stumped me a little bit. I did a postgraduate master's degree in curatorial theory and practice.
Wow.
So, which kind of is really random, but when you look at it in my kind of career trajectory, it's the mixing of academic history and communicating all of those ideas to people who don't understand them necessarily straight off the bat. So,
Interesting.
from there into marketing is not the biggest jump. It's not as random as it sounds when you look at it that way. So I came out of university, didn't really know what to do, and then somebody suggested that a marketing assistant job had come up in a company I was temping for, the academic publishing house. And so I went for the marketing assistant role, was successful, and then just continued to kind of learn and climb from there, really.
Wow. And what did that marketing assistant role look like when you were there? Kind of like in terms of like day-to-day responsibilities. What kind of things were you doing?
I was doing a lot of spreadsheet reporting. I was doing kind of the beginnings of email campaigns,
Yeah.
leafleting and things like that. It's a good 20 years ago now, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was we were still in the zone where catalogs and leaflets were a really, really big deal. So we were doing a lot of those, mail merging and the like. So really kind
And
of learning.
yeah, and was it effective? Like all the flyering and all that kind of stuff. Like, well, was it difficult to work out? Kind of like, I suppose, from all that activity, what was working, what wasn't working.
I think from what you're right. The analytics have come on, and
Yeah,
being able to tell how you're engaging your audience has come on very, very well. But I think from what we had at the time, it was working for that environment. Academics were really used to paper. They
yeah.
probably still are, to be fair. So at that point, it suited. But obviously now. Um, I can't remember the last time I created a leaflet campaign. If I'm honest, now it's all digital content and a lot of in trade and industry, a lot of trade shows as well. So that's kind of the bulk of what my days are made up with now.
Yeah. And so you had the marketing assistant role, and then kind of what
Mhm.
happened after that?
I just climbed the ladder step by step. I became a senior assistant. I then became
Yeah.
an exec, then a senior exec. And at that point, I was able to, I was um, in academic publishing, we had kind of subject areas that we were responsible for. So I was responsible for three big subject areas at that point. But then there became a bit of there was nowhere to go up from there.
Yeah.
um, I had a bit of a change in my personal side in my life as well, and kind of everything changed all at once. I made big changes all at once, and one of those things was to leave my job in the publishing house. My parents run a family business, They
Ah,
had done at that point for almost 30 years. They didn't have anybody marketing, and my father said to me, "Well, I need an exhibition done, and I need a catalogue, and you could sort out our website as well. So, you know, try it and see if you like it." He made me interview with him and three of his other senior colleagues on the management team. And during the interview, I remember he said, as I was explaining what I did in my current role, he went, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." so, so it kind of transpired that there was a lot of stuff that I was doing that he didn't realize or I was capable of or experienced in. So I joined PRF
nice.
then 12 years ago to do a trade show, a catalogue, and a few bits and pieces on the website. And 12 years later, I'm
Wow.
still there.
I've got to ask. So after you did that interview with your dad and obviously the senior leadership team, did it kind of make its way home to the dinner table? Was there any kind of phone calls like, "How did I get on?"
Um, I got offered the job then and there,
Oh,
so I
there
knew
we
I'd
go.
been successful. But I think
Awesome.
it was really important for me and for him to know that I had come to that position with experience, and
Yeah,
I could bring skills that weren't in the company already.
yeah,
And I think it was really important for me to know that I had sat down in front of a panel of people. I had proved my worth,
yeah,
and that
100%.
and that had been acknowledged and understood. Because when you're in a family business, there can be an awful sense of kind of, does everybody know why I'm here, or do they think
Yeah,
that I'm here because I'm the
yeah, hundred
daughter kind
percent.
of thing.
Yeah,
So it was a good way to do it.
yeah. And so I suppose, like, especially over like the kind of last 12 years, as you mentioned, like, how have you kind of seen like your role develop from way back when it was all kind of like flyers, spreadsheets, all the way through to kind of this modern world where everything just feels to be online kind of thing?
I feel more now less like a traditional marketer, like the
Yeah,
way I started, which is, I guess, what, in my view, I have as my archetype of what a marketeer should be. And I feel more like, I said this the other day to somebody, I feel more like almost like I'm editing a magazine. And the magazine is the company.
yeah,
And I'm constantly looking for content and interviews. And we had my nephew did some work experience for us last week, and I'm WhatsApping him questions I want him to answer for my, for the next little bit of content I'm creating. So I think it feels far more creative, and
yeah,
I like that. Um, but it also feels there is something more about kind of building. You can communicate a brand so much more in so much definition and dimension, that there is more content in order to be able to build that voice, and that,
yeah,
what do we stand for, what do we do every day, who are our people, there's all of these things that we can bring to the mix now, which you know we could have done back when I started, but the channels were a lot harder to get those sorts of messages across.
yeah. And so, do you find, I suppose, like in the role you're in now, is it more kind of like, storytelling, kind of like, as you said, kind of, here's who we are, here's what we stand for, those kind of things, do you find that any of the kind of marketing activity had to slip into the world of kind of things like lead gen and stuff like that, or not really?
Not so much. Storytelling is certainly something that
Yeah,
we are seeing growing. And even in the advanced engineering sector, which originally I would have probably said, oh, that doesn't have a place here. It does. It's just in a different way, storytelling about product development. We're putting together a case study about how one of our materials is helping one of our customers, and so there is actually a lot more creativity in advanced engineering marketing than probably I gave it credit for when I started.
yeah. And it's interesting as well. I think sometimes when I look at kind of like marketing, specifically in worlds like engineering, manufacturing, it's like what I tend to find is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but there tends to be like a lot more detail when it comes to almost like marketing products, etc., and case studies, because like engineers, when the engineers I've dealt with anyway, they tend to be quite detail orientated people.
Yep.
and like you can't really like adopt almost like a not a spray and pray approach, but like a very like wishy washy, fluffy kind of thing,
Yep, vaguety does not cut it.
No,
Absolutely. And what we're seeing as well on LinkedIn is particularly if we can give that detail, that is the detail that they really are looking for. I'm very, very clear in my role. I'm not technical. I work very closely with my technical colleagues so that I can get that information right. Because the worst thing would be to go to market with things that are not, I's dotted, T's crossed. Because yeah,
yeah,
as you say, they are high class engineers. They will notice it,
yeah, yeah,
and they're not backwards in coming forwards either. So
yeah,
you got to be on. Yeah, you got to be. You got to know your stuff, and if you don't know your stuff, you need to go to the person that does and say,
yeah.
"Check me, double check me, because this needs to be spot on."
Yeah, and do you find as well? So like when we talk about back in the day doing the whole flyering, all that kind of stuff, and versus today social media on these online tools, especially with the analytics side of things, do you find that like things have got easier, things have got harder, or yeah, like kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that, really.
I think I think things have got easier as long as you can tune out the noise that is not relevant to you. So there's so much on these platforms that you can pull in, um, and I sometimes get colleagues kind of saying, "Oh, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that?" And at some point, you've got to say, "It's interesting, but is it relevant? Will it actually
Yeah,
help me do my job better?" Um, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's it's a nice to know, but actually, does it change the way I do things? No. So, I mean, I'm a one man band, a one woman
yeah,
band, and I work part time, and I'm a full time mum. So I have what I have learned from that, from juggling the work and family life, is that I have to be really focused about what will get me my results and what I need to know.
yeah,
And I have to also not reinvent the wheel every time I approach something. Most things at this point I've done once at least. Um, what can I use that I've done in the past to make this new task easier? What can I? The building blocks are mostly all there, and if they're
yeah,
not, how can I find? Because I mean we're 2024 now. I wanted to have a look at the how LinkedIn had changed its algorithms. Am I gonna do a 6 month project on my own trying to work that out, or am I going to use Google and get all of the expert articles up and go through them and learn what they already know rather than doing it myself? So
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of tools out there, but I think sometimes it's easy to be distracted by all
Do you
of
know what?
the
I
info.
completely agree with you. Completely agree, and I love the word you use there, focus, because I think marketing's one of those worlds where, and especially now with all the emerging technologies and stuff, there's just so much that you could know, and there's so much you could be doing. It almost gets to the point where it's paralyzing.
Yeah,
With how much could be happening, how much you could be doing, and all these different specialism, skill sets, etc. But and I think I had a bit of a come to Jesus moment a few months ago, where it's like, actually, well, what have we always done? What have we always worked? Is it still working? If so, just double down. You know, and I know you sometimes hear people say, "Oh, just because it worked yesterday doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work tomorrow." And you know what? You're right. But if it worked yesterday and it's still working today, it might still work tomorrow, right? So it's like
yeah,
it's only really a problem when it becomes a problem, I suppose.
yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and
And
it's
we're not we're not
yeah,
we're not we're not brain surgeons. We
yeah,
can make a cut, and it can be something that is not 100% perfect, and then tomorrow we can fix it, or we can, the errors, they're not really the errors, the steps that we make that aren't, 100% engagement rate, amazing, it's gone viral. You can't have that all of the time. Sometimes, your performance is not going to be where you want it. Go back, have a look at it, see what you could have done differently, and
yeah,
do it again. So do it better next time. But yeah, it's not. We always used to have a saying back in the back when I worked in academic publishing, that they are just books. We're not doing something that we should be paralyzed by trying to make by the potential of making a wrong step. And I think that allows us to be creative.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we stifle all of that.
It's really interesting that you say that. You're right, because like sometimes I find, when I'm speaking to like marketing directors and stuff, sometimes in some situations there's almost like anxiety to try something and get it wrong, and yeah, marketing's just one of those things where, like, if you do want to kind of, broaden the horizon, I suppose the only way you can do that, I think, is by trying things, right? And sometimes those things won't work, and we kind of need to be okay with that. But like,
Yeah.
I suppose, what do you think the kind of biggest challenges are for marketing directors within businesses? Kind of from what you see, like, because sometimes what I find is there's an expectation from the directors of the business in terms of like what marketing should do, etc. For some organisations, a huge ROI focus. We're not going to spend £1 unless we get two back,
Yeah.
and it's like. And then as a result, if they spend £1, they don't get two back. That's when you start to see budgets deflate and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So what
Yeah.
I was curious to hear your thoughts on
I
some
think
of the challenges.
yeah, that is probably the biggest challenge I have, is probably proving ROI, and
Yeah,
where I know I can't, justifying that expense. So I'm very lucky in that, my boss, being my dad,
yeah,
um, he is not a marketer, just like I'm not technical, and we made those lines
yeah,
really clear when I started. And so if I say I think that we this will benefit us, he says, you're the person with the experience in this. I trust you. You go ahead and you do that.
yeah,
And I think time allows you to build on that relationship with your
yeah,
superiors, so they can see that maybe the results don't come back immediately after that show that you did, but the
yeah,
next show is better, and then the next show is better than that. And so time is a great thing for building those trust relationships, because there does have to be an element of trust in it. um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I think the other thing that I face a lot of the time, and this is just, this is in general life, is that everybody thinks they're a marketer, right?
oh yeah,
Everybody thinks that what we do is just common sense.
yeah, yeah.
And
If you make a Facebook
and
page, that's
anybody,
it. You're in.
yeah, and anybody can do it. And that can be a very frustrating challenge. I, having somebody explain to you why their idea, or which would never work, is a brilliant idea, and they saw
Yeah,
Nike doing it the other day, so why aren't we doing it? And
yeah,
going,
yeah,
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 yeah, and those kinds of things, and um, like I said, I'm really, really lucky with my leadership team. My father is now CEO, and our MD joined us in 2020, and he's very good at saying, you know what you're doing. We can see
yeah,
after 12 years the results of what you're doing. So, go ahead and be free and have autonomy. But at the same time, I don't just go and then never revert back to them. I'm always involved in product development. I'm involved in the sales line. I'm involved, and I involve them as well. What's the feedback from the show? This is what I'm thinking for the next show. What do you think, guys? I've got a random promo idea. How about this? Is this too weird? And sometimes it's just because I need somebody to bounce off,
yeah,
being on my own in the team. And sometimes it's because they are more, probably sales especially, are more closely connected to the market than I am.
yeah.
So getting their feedback is essential for me to make those decisions as well. So I think whilst I have autonomy, I don't allow myself to be an island, which is
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you,
is
and do
important.
you know what? When like I completely hear you as well when you say there needs to be trust between marketing and leadership of the company. Because what I've noticed, sometimes if I sit in a board meeting and they're going through the P&L and stuff, it's like it's just a number on a spreadsheet. The investment
Yeah,
into marketing. And one thing you mentioned earlier, which I totally agree with. Sometimes it's tricky to like connect the dots between doing that thing over here and connecting all the dots all the way through to the revenue up there, and like sometimes you do need a bit of belief and trust and autonomy, just like, well, okay, so here's the situation with all the stuff we're doing. Now, the only way we can really test whether it's working is let's just do nothing and see what
Yeah.
happens to the numbers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like all these events you go to, let's just not go to any next year and see what
Yeah.
happens. You know, and
Yeah.
it's like it's one of those things, and I totally agree with you around the trust piece, and like and one of the other things as well, like which I find is quite a big thing for marketers, and I'm finding marketing people driving this more and more. But like, is the sustainability piece, right? Because like it's a huge hot topic. You know, if I'm being brutally honest, I think some brands and companies just jump on the bandwagon because we feel like we should be talking about it. You know, because I think sometimes we're like humans are like sheep in a way where it's like, right, what's the next hot topic that we all need to be talking about, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so do you find that do you find is sustainability really a focus for you, and B, do you
Hmm.
find that marketing tends to drive it more because we're the ones focused on how our brand looks and feels to the world?
Um, uh, Answer to the question, sustainability is a massive focus for us. For me as a marketer, for us as a company, I think that's driven by two things. Um, Number one, we are one of our company values is integrity, has
Yeah,
been since the company was founded, and I think that there are all steps that we can be taking to make ourselves more sustainable, and where they don't affect commerce, then we should be taking them. Um, the second reason that it's really one of the drivers of marketing messages at the moment is because in our industry it's really crucial.
yeah,
So in composites, we started talking about sustainability a number of years ago, um, and it started to become something that is really key for a number of competitive and also environmental reasons. Recycling of composite materials, really
yeah,
important. Carbon embedding, um, the energy used to produce the materials that we make, and the components that are then those materials go into. And end users are driving a lot of this because we're seeing, automotive companies and renewable energy companies and aerospace, they're all getting significant attention to make themselves, well, renewable energy is a little safer because of by its nature, but especially automotive and aerospace, there's focus from government and also from the general public on our
yeah,
industry to really organize ourselves and get our recycling, our circularity, and
yeah,
our sustainability improved and sorted and answer these questions. Now, the questions aren't going to be answered immediately, but the industry is taking huge steps towards it.
yeah,
So for us, sustainability is really big. We have seen for the last couple of years that it's been kind of in the marketing messages. It has been very much nods to, ticks to. Let's put some plants on the exhibition stand, and that's what that everybody knows what that means. And our strapline that I came up with a long time ago was doing things differently. And I would say that kind of applies to the sustainability aspect. So
yeah,
we're looking at trying to make our materials. We're not changing yet. We're not changing our materials to involve bio, but we are looking at how our materials can use less energy to process, how we can incorporate recycled composite materials, how we can look at end of life and circularity and
yeah.
things like that. So yeah, marketing there's a huge focus on sustainability. Um,
But just want to
yeah.
pick you up on that, Hannah, because
Mm,
I think that's the difference between trying to look more green, but then actually taking steps to become more green,
yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
because I think
Absolutely.
it's very easy to say go be greener, you know, but for many businesses, I suppose, especially in engineering and manufacturing, that's a huge old task to actually navigate the world of how do we actually become greener, because but then also try to maintain the health, the financial health of the business, right? Because like, I mean, if you take events world, for example, and exhibitions, usually, not in all cases, but usually the greener option is more expensive. So it's almost like it has to be a balance, right? And almost like a
Yep.
proportionate approach to it. And as time goes on, I suppose.
Yep. And
Um,
our
yeah,
materials are from the kind of, we're talking about materials that have been in use for decades now,
yeah,
and the idea that they're going to be switched overnight to new things, um, and that's okay if you're doing something that doesn't require huge amounts of technical performance,
yeah,
but when you're putting materials into, aeroplanes and cars and things that, you've got to be looking at actually how can we make the materials that currently go into those end applications better, whilst we do the rest of the work to look for new materials, because that
yeah,
one's not an overnight job. So that's kind of, and the difficulty as a marketer with that kind of message is to say we're green is a huge amount easier than to talk about a more complicated version of that. And
yeah,
that's taken me a while to get to grips with, actually. How do we get such a multifaceted message across? Because we're looking at ourselves and our own operations. We're looking at our materials and our product development, and then we're looking at what those materials then do in our customers when they're being
yeah,
processed. So it's a more complicated message, but I think I'm up to the challenge.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely right. And it's interesting as well, because one thing I just want to rewind back to is something
Mm,
you said a few minutes ago around how there's no real, and you're right, there's no barrier to enter in marketing. Now when there is no kind of barrier to entering at all, I know you've got, like, Charles Institute of Marketing and stuff. Some argue that it's great, some argue that you don't need it. There's varying opinions and stuff. But I suppose marketing very much is unregulated, really, in terms of you can kind of
mhm.
like you're buying into opinions, ideas, and experience, really. Now, what kind of challenges do you think that poses to those? Because anyone can kind of just come in and make a Facebook page and say they're a marketer. Do you think, like, someone like you, maybe Hannah, who's a marketing director of a business and maybe at some point needs support with something, do you find that puts there's a big kind of like trust thing there around, like, is this person actually right for a job if I was going to go work with a freelancer, for example, that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. And I think I think also that I like I think it helps me particularly in this industry because I've lived this industry for, I mean, the company's older than I am.
Yeah,
So I know engineers because I grew up with a composites engineer, and I've embedded that kind of personality into who I understand that. I know how to relate to him. I know how to, persuade him
yeah,
because he's my dad, and I've done lots of that, not marketing related. So there's kind of, perhaps there's that I'm very used to the composites engineer, and as a family business that
yeah,
used to that still does actually work with other family businesses, because composites has is a very it's a very young industry, and there is still a sense that it's like quite a cottage industry. So I have known, um, we have suppliers, particularly German companies that are family, tend to be moved from father to son and
yeah,
onwards through the
yeah, yeah.
generations. I've grown up with the people who now run those companies, quite
Wow.
literally. I've played in their back gardens and things like that. So I think perhaps if I think as marketers, one that hasn't gone through formal marketing training, there is sometimes a little bit of an imposter syndrome, or am I doing everything that I'm supposed, am I box ticking everything I'm supposed to be box ticking here?
Yeah,
Um, but it helps for me anyway that my expertise are not only in the marketing and the communications, based on being in these roles now for near 20 years, but also the industry that I'm talking to and the company that I'm talking about is something that I've known my entire life.
yeah,
So I think. one helps me combat the sense of, oh, am I doing it right? Do I know the jargon that they're going to be talking about? Because, as much as I say I've been, looking up the LinkedIn algorithm changes and things like that, as much as we try and keep on top of those things,
Yeah.
much of your day to day is, you're busy marketing your company, so you don't necessarily get to have those moments where you can grab a cup of coffee and study something new
Yeah,
that's coming
yeah.
out. And everything's fast paced and moving so quickly. There is sometimes a sense that am I keeping up to date? Do
Yeah.
I know all of the things that I now should know? um, but but like I said, sometimes that is noise.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will benefit you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is just a bit distracting.
Yeah, it's so interesting because one thing I'm finding, Hannah, as a result of doing these episodes and these podcasts, and interviewing marketing directors, I hear a lot of the same things. I hear about that, perceived imposter syndrome, almost like that head trash going on and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. And maybe that's a result of I suppose this world just being so open in terms of like what we said a minute ago about how you can never know everything, right?
yeah,
I mean, if you're like I don't know. Let's just say you're a solicitor focusing on employment law, right? You could probably learn 90% of what there is to know about employment law in this country over a career,
yeah,
and keep up to date with some legislation changes and stuff like that. But where marketing is almost like so much more wide open, and maybe that kind of plays a part in it. And
yeah.
but one thing I wanted to kind of ask you as well was, I suppose, and it's been so interesting to kind of hearing the story about how you've grown up, with your dad, kind of he's always been in the business, and you've joined the business, and you've lived and breathed it. Is there anything, if you could step in a time machine
hmm
and kind of rewind to any point in your career, is there anything you would rewind back to and actually change something or do something differently?
I I I don't know that I would change it, because I'm not sure if I put myself back in that position, it, whether we were doing the right things at the right time. But I look back at my first stands for PRF and go, oh, I shudder, because it was, they were very much like, not even about the stand furniture or anything like that. It was about like taking all your wares, like a suitcase, and here are all my
Yeah,
watches that you can buy. And we're selling composite materials, so a lot of what we're selling you can't really put on a stand like that. But somehow I still
yeah,
tried, and taking all the technical data for every single product that we had in case one person asked for it. We used to, carry boxes of hundreds of copies of technical data to the show, and then carry hundreds of these things back. So I think now I'm very much bolder, and when the team say, "Oh, can we have that printed?" I go, "No, no.
yeah,
If
yeah.
somebody wants it, you can follow up in an email for that. Yeah, no, we're not
But
doing that."
that's just experience, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
just
it is.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
because let's say we went back to that first exhibition stand. At that moment in time, you probably looked at that and thought, "This looks brilliant."
I do. Yeah, 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 yeah. I thought,
You know,
good job, done a good job there. Yeah,
and it's amazing as time
yeah,
goes on. Then you start to look back on your
yeah,
time hop and looking at all the old photos and stuff, and you think, "Oh my god, what was
yeah.
happening there?"
Yeah, and
No,
like our pre-preg, it lives in the freezer. It has an outlife, and underneath exhibition lights in display cabinets, it goes crusty, and I'm thinking, looking back at me, thinking, what
yeah,
were you doing? Why were you putting these things in display cabinets? But like you said, it's only with the experience and the hindsight, and also the fashions now with exhibition stands are much greater than they used to be. Um, and also, I think somebody reminded me not so long ago about my curatorial theory and practice MA, that like exhibitions in museums and the exhibiting of artifacts is very similar to actually exhibiting a component and then trying to pull the story out of that component. Like, and then it kind of, a little light bulb went off in my head, like, why aren't I doing that? Why am I
mm,
trying to take the materials? Why aren't I just using the objects and then using what I know to tell the story of these objects, and that's how you sell.
Yeah,
Not actually by taking everything and trying to get somebody to pick what they want at that particular time, but you sell by telling that story and pulling those messages out of things, and
yeah,
that's completely doable, because you've done it. So yeah, it was something that I hadn't made the connection with until I was talking to, funnily enough, our quality consultant, about my former academic training, and he was like, "Yeah, that really makes a huge amount of sense." I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Actually, when you think about it
yeah.
like that." And then that set off a whole
100%.
kind of new train of thinking.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a really nice story as well because I'm still yet to meet someone who was like, I don't know, 14 years old at school, and they're sat there in the playground thinking to themselves, when I grow up, I want to be a marketer. I'm still yet to meet someone who's kind of who kind of had that ambition. But I suppose one thing would be quite nice to people listening to this, Hannah, is like, what advice would you give someone who's really at the starting point of their marketing career now? And that maybe they have some aspirations and ambitions to one day be in a kind of senior marketing position. If so, kind of what would you kind of say to them?
Um, I would think about breadth of experience rather than depth of experience in one field, because I think that, um, marketing is so wide and it varies. I mean, I've only done it in two industries, but both of those they obviously have transferable skills, but they're both very different because they're very different industries. So I would say, in order to have longevity in your career and be able to make switches across industry, um, I would think about breadth of experience. And I think that will also mean that if you go not too deep, but if you focus just on perhaps on one expertise, everything that you know about everything else will get further and further behind, and you're not kind of current or nearly current with anything except that one thing that absolutely,
Yeah,
that's your thing. And if you have to change industries at any point, sometimes that one thing that you're brilliant at might not be relevant at all. And as we've talked about already in this chat, the things that I was doing 20 years ago, I do a little bit. If some of those skills have completely fallen by the wayside, some of those skills, like designing a flyer on InDesign, I now use for designing a little graphic for LinkedIn. Some of those
yeah,
skills are transferable, but some of those skills will fall behind or will fall away as marketing changes. Um, so I think breadth is really important, and perhaps not so much expertise and depth on single trajectories.
yeah. I hear that. And I suppose last question really for you, Hannah. So pretending we kind of rolled the dice and you never went into marketing, what would you be doing?
Yeah. Oh, what would I be doing? Do you know, as a kid, I really wanted to be a Disney illustrator.
Really?
Really wanted to be a
Wow.
Disney illustrator. Yeah, I had a whole plan of going to America and actually working at the studio, and that's changed completely as well. So you know,
So
so
were
yeah,
you a huge Disney fan?
yeah,
Still are?
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Still a huge Disney fan?
Oh yeah, I've got two kids, so
Yeah.
and I've got a boy and a girl, so I have to cover the entire gamut because my little girl is obsessed with Elsa and Anna at the moment,
Wow.
and my boy is a little bit more into The Incredibles. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I've got to
I
say, a couple of years ago, I went over to Florida for a conference, and a friend of mine who I went with is Disney obsessed, and I really didn't want to go to Disney World. Didn't want to go. Didn't want to go. Didn't want to go. Took me, blown away,
yeah,
blown away. So
and I think one of the things that the Disney Corporation, I mean, not they take a huge amount of bashing, and they're a huge corporation, so they should stand up to scrutiny. But one of the things that I think really comes across when you go to one of those parks is that they believe in their brand,
Yeah.
and that's something for me as a family business. And I've always said I will never fudge something. I will never lie as a marketer. I don't think it does you any good at all whatsoever. But I really believe in our brand because I've seen it. I've seen it be built. I've seen the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into it. And I think that when I put something together for it out into the market, I think I think that's in it. I think
Yeah.
that's in the content I create, is that I love my brand and I really believe in the company and I believe in the people and the team that created it and that now are building it going forward. So I think that's really, really important as well.
And I suppose that's the difference right there between a artificially created brand story and message versus an authentic business, an authentic marketing, which represents what you see on the outside is exactly what you see on the inside. You know,
Yeah. And I
so
think those we're all wired to pick up on those things. Even if we pick up on them subconsciously, we all can kind of get when somebody's not telling us quite the truth, or when
yeah,
somebody really, really believes in what they're doing. And I think that I do think that comes through in marketing as well. And
yeah,
I think if you don't believe in what you're doing, you're not going to do a very good job at it. So that's really, really important for me.
yeah. Well, guys, there we have it. Another fantastic episode of Inside Marketing. So, look, wherever you consume your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, be sure to subscribe, like, and share. Hannah, thank you so much for your time. Tremendous episode. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And no, thank you. Really appreciate it.
It's been great. It's been really, really good to chat. Thank you, Josh.
Cheers. Boom.